Welcome to today's episode, brought to you by the Women in Medicine Summit, a transformational CME conference happening September 13th to 14th at the Drake Hotel in Chicago. Engage in leadership programming, learn negotiation skills, receive on-site coaching and mentoring, and see who will win this year's I Stand With Her awards. This year, we're excited to offer unique programming that includes a special session on how using improv comedy can bring fun back into medicine. We also have financial sessions tailored to help you navigate the complexities of personal and professional finances. Discover ways to advance into leadership roles, combat burnout, and either reignite your love for your current role or find joy in a new career path. Don't forget our Friday evening gala, a highlight this year you definitely won't want to miss. Register now at womeninmedicinesummit.org and be part of the movement that is shaping the future of healthcare. Join us to network, learn, and celebrate the power of women in medicine.
Welcome to the Revitalizing Doctor podcast. We interview trailblazers in medicine that embody the Revitalize Women vision to empower women to innovate and influence medicine, to value authenticity, respect, and work-life harmony. We recognize the challenges in medicine, and we're committed to providing coaching-informed strategies to help you go from surviving to thriving. I'm so excited today to have Dr. Wendy Schofer. She is a playful soul, a pediatrician, an improv comedian, which I can't wait to pick her brain about, a military veteran, and lifelong military spouse, which anybody who doesn't really understand what that entails, that's its own category of amazingness, and a professional coach for parents and families. Play isn't a diversion, it's a value and driving force for Wendy, and has become an integral part of her journey through burnout, reinvigorating a career in medicine, creating health, and thriving as a coach for parents and professionals who also get to experience the neuroscience benefits of play, which this could not be better timed because that's actually something I'm struggling with. And I'd love to pick your brain. And I'm guessing a few listeners could also use some help with play. But let's back up. Hi, Wendy. Welcome.
Hi, Andrea. Thank you so much for joining me on this very cold day as we're sharing our favorite cups of hot warmth here.
Yeah, I'm physically in San Diego and it's crazy, foggy, weird weather out there. And where are you physically located? Because it's not always the same place.
Yes. So I am typically in Virginia, but I drove to Pennsylvania yesterday to visit with my family and woke up this morning to a frightening temperature. I had to actually check that my app was working okay when it said it was 10 degrees outside. I'm like, is that in Celsius or what is this? So yes, it's 10 degrees, maybe a little bit warmer now. I'm just cold thinking about it.
Wow. Yeah, it's been crazy, the brutal weather that's been happening. I actually, pro tip for the listeners, one of the things I did a few years ago is I run cold. I probably have Raynaud's. So as I'm sitting at this desk, I have my feet in this little warmer because for whatever reason, we need to probably get the stucco fixed on our house. It's a little drafty under my desk. And so I complained about it to my husband. And because he's awesome, he was like, oh, well, we should just get you this foot warmer thing and you could stay nice and toasty.
That sounds lovely.
Yeah, I just made this rule a few years ago that I was just going to be more comfortable. And, I run cold. And so I have, even though I'm in San Diego, I have like my warm stuff that I get out and that I take with me on shift. And it's made a big difference just saying, I'm going to do things to be more comfortable.
Yeah. And Lord knows they're not going to be doing that in the department. So it's what you get to bring and give to yourself along the way. That's awesome. Do you take all your fuzzies into the ER as well?
I roll with a pretty big bag because I never know what I'm going to need. And sometimes it's something that smells good because let's face it, sometimes it smells terrible. And I did not know that I have a crazy sense of smell. any med students listening, you may want to think about that with your career choice. I mean, it's wickedly good. I mean, I can tell a GI bleed from like 100 yards.
Wow. Wait, that you're totally reminding me for like all the short list of like how I figured out how I didn't want to be a general surgeon. Thank you very much for the experience of letting me pack wounds in medical school. That was off my list for the exact same reason you're talking about. And I will just say to all the OBGYNs in the house, thank you for what you do. And I will receive the baby and carry on in my pediatric realm over here. I can deal with pediatric smells. It's also why I don't do podiatry. No orthopedics, nothing, feet. Mm-mm. No, thank you.
It's an important list to go through. Well, let's talk about what you actually do. I'm very excited to have a pediatrician on the podcast, but that's not really the full story. What else do you do?
Oh my gosh. I never know where to start the story. It's always which thread do I want to pick up? Because, in truth, what I do depends on the day. And a couple of years ago, I thought that was really a big liability for me. Like I wasn't consistently going into the office. I was doing things out in the community as I was trying to get my feet underneath me after I was done with my active duty time. And slowly but surely, I started owning it. And now I can say that I do a little bit of everything. So what that looks like, I am a pediatric urgent care physician. So I work PRN for the Children's Hospital. We have standalone urgent care offices. I am getting reaffiliated as a general pediatrician through the naval hospitals. And so still getting to practice with a general pediatrician mindset and view. I have my coaching business. And so coaching parents, coaching physicians, as we were talking about, bringing play back into our life and how we can create health with that foundation of play. And then the rest of it, I'm playing myself. Like it's embracing and acknowledging I build in time to be able to, go rock climbing, to be able to just go out for walks, to be able to embrace that creative side of myself. And so I actually acknowledge that's what I do because it's a big part of me. And yes, improv is definitely a part of that play.
Well, I want to learn more about that because I was actually in Portland last weekend and I got to see Tina Fey and Amy Poehler, and they became friends in Second City, Chicago, very famous improv coming up school, essentially. And they did improv. They opened the show actually with an improv set that was absolutely hilarious. They took some suggestions, some prompts from the audience on like sci-fi, or I think they did murder mystery. It was awesome. But can you explain a little bit about how you found improv and how it feeds into your life now?
Okay. The honest to goodness story, I found improv because I was hitting a wall. So my husband was deployed yet again. I had some probably 10 and 13, something like that year-old kids that I was like, listen, I need a break from y'all. I need adults. I just need to get out of the house. And I signed up for an improv 101 class. How exactly I got there, I don't know, but I did. And it was just a chance for me to be able to get out and not have to talk about all the same things, whether that's with teenagers or about medicine over and over again. So yeah, it was just a diversion. And I got to tell you, when I first went, oh my gosh, it was so hard for me. It was so hard because I walked in there thinking, that I don't want to talk about medicine. I don't want to talk about kids. And yet I went in there as a pediatrician. Like I could only see myself through the lens of, well, what would a pediatrician do? well, I'm a professional. Well, I'm a mom. Can I say that? Can I do that? And so it was a really hard time. I actually didn't graduate from that first class because of scheduling issues. They changed the graduation show, so I didn't get to participate in it. And so I decided that I didn't graduate. And then COVID happened. And after this very long break, I came back. COVID made me think, you know what? I need to get back out. I need to play some more. And I went and I did the class again. And it was completely different because I got to, I don't know, I guess in the intervening years, I had learned how to kind of set down the baggage as far as like what it was that I was carrying with me about being a mom, a pediatrician, a professional, kind of checking that at the door and just saying, this is where I'm just going to go and play.
Wow. I have a feeling there's some listeners going, but how do you set it down? I've done some identity work. Many people that listen know that Cherie Johnson has coached me, and there's been quite a bit of writing about how physicians have an overemphasis on that side of their identity. And it really, I don't fault any physician that does. I mean, my goodness, when you go through something in which you work 80 hours a week, in which you had a period of time in which you really didn't have time to have a more full self, it doesn't surprise me that, you wake up and you're like, well, this is all I am. How did you begin to have a broader sense of self? Is that the right way to phrase it, do you think?
I think it's something that I'm still working on. I can't say that it's something like, okay, I've mastered it. Bags are checked at the door. In truth, I notice when I'm carrying them. And I think one of the best examples that I have is actually from improv. So I think I'd gone through up to the 401 class and I was selected to be on one of the house teams. So, just where folks who have had some experience get to be on teams, we got to go out and do the Herald, which is a particular type of improv. And so we were just practicing one night in somebody's apartment and we had, who are you? Where are you? And go. And my friend Patrick and I were told that we were nuns and we were in New York City and we just went off. And we, it was Sister Mary Josephine and Sister Jill were wandering around the city. Of course, our hands were together, in a prayer position, looking up at the sky. And we were on the top of the Empire State Building because we were closer to God that way. And all of a sudden, we were just stopped. And our mentor was like, what are you doing? We're like, well, we're nuns in New York City. He's like, we know that. We know that. Nobody comes into a room and tells you who they are. They don't describe their job. They don't talk about what it is that they do all the time. He's like, I'm a shipbuilder, and you would never know that because I never walk in here saying I'm a shipbuilder. And I said, hold my beer. You haven't met a doctor or a mom because we all walk in with, I'm a physician. We all walk in with, I'm a mom. It's just so much of our identity, and we lead with that. And this was not that long ago that I just had this moment where I was like, oh my God, not everybody lives this way. Not everybody goes around, leading with their character by what it is that they do and letting that define everything. And so I think to actually answer your question, it's more of a realization of when I am doing it and starting to ask myself, but is that really letting the rest of my character, like the real me, come out? And my mentor, said, I don't want to hear anything about you being nuns. No more. I want to know what's important to you. What are you feeling? Now, of course, as a coach, I'm like, oh my God, it's all coming back to the emotions. It's coming back to the values. It's coming back to the needs, to the strengths. Like, of course it is. And so I think that's something where it's a reminder that I guess in a way I keep on thinking in improv, I'm practicing with being all these characters so they can let me actually play this character, the one that I am every single day, the one that I choose to be, in a way that is meaningful and authentic to me, and realize when I'm kind of carrying all the other stuff that I think it needs to look like.
Wow. I mean, that is just so profound and is getting me thinking about how I'd like to take an improv comedy class. So I'm going to have to look into that. I've always just been a huge fan of comedy and especially improv. There was a retreat I went to a few years ago that very cleverly opened with improv coaches, and we got to practice a little bit. So it's been on my mind for a few years. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Well, and I'd say that it's even, I'm just like saying thank you to myself right now, because it's going into that area, not because I'm trying to be funny. It's actually to just kind of practice living beyond the walls of what it is that I've put up for right now and just playing with it. Just, part of the thing with improv is that they say if you don't fail, you weren't trying hard enough. And meaning like you're not trying something bold or outside of your comfort zone, whether it's a character, an accent, a relationship, whatever it is. And I think of improv so much more as just kind of trying things, again, playing without having to know where it's going, without having to be funny. Improv actually isn't about being funny at all. It's about being real.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Are you a physician mom with school-aged children feeling utterly exhausted? My friend Dr. Sheeta Shaffi invites you to take a little time this summer to join her in a small, intimate group for meaningful conversations. Dr. Shaffi is an emergency physician, coach, and mom to 8-year-old twins. She understands firsthand what you're going through. This isn't a pizza party or a yoga class. You'll meet for 2 one-hour sessions twice a month starting in July to help you move out of exhaustion, let go of mom guilt, and live a life you're not only proud of, but can truly enjoy. Connect with her on LinkedIn or Instagram at Sheeta Shaffi to learn more. Sheeta is spelled Shideh, and Shaffi is spelled Shafie. You can also check the show notes for a link so you can connect with her there as well. Goosebumps. I think we need more of that. We need that in medicine, and we need it as women as well, because there's such an overlay of so much that's projected on what being a woman is supposed to be in this society. I want to turn to your doctor origin story, which means why did you become a doctor? And then I want to unpack if that's still the same reasons that you're practicing medicine today, because really what you've outlined to me is you wouldn't have to practice medicine if you didn't want to. You have your coaching practice. And I think that's really powerful for people to reflect on about why are you still doing it, even despite a lot of the challenges that we're facing?
There is so much in that question. Well, the short answer of why I became a doctor is because I realized that I could not join the FBI to do genetic fingerprinting and be out in the field all the time. It's just not the way it works. So I had fallen in love with Punnett squares and CSI back in the very early days and thought, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And then I realized how much lab bench work does not speak to me whatsoever. And so at the same time in college, as I was experimenting and trying all the different things, including a lot of laboratory work, oh gosh, no, it was not for me. But I was also doing volunteer work at the local emergency room. And my role as a volunteer college student was basically to hang out with people while they waited in the emergency room either to be seen or while their family members were, being evaluated, whatever it was. And I just love the connections. And I started seeing the value of relationships and how that was something that I could take all of my interest in biology and genetics and science and apply that in medicine. So that was really the entry point to my career. And then, of course, like we said, noticing there are certain smells that I can't handle. So that helped me determine which specialty to go into. But, as you mentioned about what keeps me going now, I got to tell you, I have come to the point where I can actually admit to myself, I don't have to do this. I don't. I have walked away from medicine in different ways over time. And I'm recognizing that what I'm doing now is I'm choosing to practice, choosing how I want to practice, when, where, all of that, but it's totally my choice. And it's not because I have a coaching business. I'm choosing coaching as well. I don't have to do it. I don't have to. And I think that's something that's so powerful. It's not that I have to define myself by the work that I do, kind of going back to that identity thing, but it's not that, well, I have to do something. Because I think a lot of times we kind of leave ourselves in this place where we're like, well, this is the least sucky option that I can possibly choose right now. Or I need to find something else other than this, as opposed to what it is that we really want to do. And I love just, it's coming back to connections and relationships. And, even in pediatric urgent care, it's still about connections and relationships, even though, I always thought that's for primary care. And I realized that I'm building those connections and relationships every single time. People don't come to pediatric urgent care because they're having the greatest day of their life. And so my reminder to myself is that I just want to make it a little bit better. How can I connect with them, see what it is that they need today? What is it that they need to share, get off their heart? What is it that they need from me? And that is really meaningful. It's also really meaningful that I get to tell my boss how and when that works for me. And so we recently, the practice shifted over to 12-hour shifts. And I said, no, there is no way that does not work for me. I do not work 12-hour shifts. As someone who puts so much energy into my practice, for someone that is fueled by space and quiet, I can't work 12 hours at a time. And so I found a sweet spot. I told them what I can work, and they're like, okay, that's awesome. So I'm that short shift person. If you remember Cheers, whenever Norm would come in, everybody's like, Norm. Well, I feel like Norm because I come in, everybody's like, Wendy, you're here. Like, all the high fives and fist bumps. I'm here. I'm going to have a good time. And then I'm going to.
This is such a powerful message to everyone listening. And I had the same experience about 2 or 3 years ago at a place where it was like, oh, well, we do 12s. And I had done 12s at another emergency department, and I knew what happened to my body. And really, cognitive function for me, cognitive load just reaches a point for me in the emergency department that past 8 hours, I don't think as crisply as is okay with me. I think I was still safe to practice, but the type of doctor that I like being, I don't do it past 8 hours. And so I shared that, and my boss was like, oh, okay, well, we'll just schedule you differently. And I mind blowing, absolutely mind blowing. And what it's got me thinking about is there's so many problems right now with medicine, but I kind of feel like the fire is started within the house. Like we can actually put these fires out by holding some boundaries, by saying, actually, no, I can't do that. I won't do that. And you can say it nicely.
Keep on thinking about how is it that we can build practices around what works for us, not trying to shove us into, with the language of the military, like all the billets and all the slots and like, well, you have this hole that you need to fill, as opposed to this is how I work at my best. How can we, build that? Because, how you work at your best is very likely complemented by how someone else works at their best. And so bringing that together, it's not about making exceptions. It's about, and I'm going to get all literary here, but like weaving together a tapestry where we get to figure out how we can collectively do this at our best. And so maybe for some people it is doing 12s because they want to do less of them. And for others, my sweet spot is somewhere between 4 and 6 hours. Like I'll take those shifts. Those are beautiful. Those are absolutely beautiful. And it energizes the others that are there all day long by their choice. How does that work together?
Yeah, that is profound. And I really hope that our listeners think about how they can do that. My question to the listeners is always, how can you do that individually? And how can you make that happen collectively? A lot of people listening have some leadership roles that maybe they're the assistant medical director or the medical director. And, you can begin to shift this, to ask questions. And I truly believe that if you have a schedule, and I've written schedules before, so I know what a huge pain it is. And yeah, you might have to say, well, we still need this shift covered or whatever. But I think you probably could find more creative ways, but we get so used to this overlay that, well, this is the way the schedule's always been written. This is how we've always done it. And that's from the coaching world. That's an example of a limiting belief. So looking for where are those limiting beliefs that have infected the way we think and the way our organizations think and act.
I'm also thinking along with that limiting belief, when I started realizing that all this institutional, organizational, that's the way it's always been done, really sounds like that's the patriarchy in action, saying this is the way you're going to do it. It's not just about my limiting belief. It's about recognizing I'm tired of living according to somebody else's rules for, how I need to do it, and thinking there's something wrong with me because it doesn't work for me. Man, that was a big epiphany for me way back when, thinking that just because I didn't have the energy left over at the end of full-time outpatient pediatric clinic, I had 0 left in the tank when I got home from my kids because I'd spent it all in the office. And I thought there was something wrong with me because every single job said, you will work as a full-time pediatrician. I'm like, oh my God, I can't do this. There's something wrong with me. And over time, realizing, no, that's just not the way I work. And I recently had a conversation with the CEO. I was working locums at a location and met the CEO in the hallway. And she said to me, we'd love to have you stay on. And we want to know how you work at your best. We hear wonderful things, but we want to know how we can be of support to you. Because when our doctors work at their best, our patients get the best care. And I said, hold the phone. And I went back to my desk and I wrote it all out. And I said, this is how I work at my best. And I basically pitched the clinic of my dreams, how much I'd be working, how I would be able to deliver care in innovative ways to the patients, how it was building together. And it really occurred to me that I had never been asked that question before. How do you, as a doctor, work at your best? And it was just green light.
I'm just having this moment. I'm just letting that wash over me. And for our revitalized community members, I think that's going to be our February challenge. Write a letter to yourself about how you work at your best. I mean, it's simple and profound. And it also makes me think about my word of the year for 2024 is integrity. And, I shared with you before we started recording that I have COVID right now. I actually feel great. I didn't feel great yesterday, but I feel pretty good right now. And I notified my team that I had COVID and I wouldn't be able to work yesterday. And that was about integrity. I won't be at my best, even though I don't feel terrible. And there were times in my residency that I think I had a cold that was worse than what I was feeling yesterday, but it wasn't right. Somebody could get sick from me being there. And working at our best for me is about integrity. And this has been like the first year that I've really told myself that I will show up with integrity for me. And it's not about the other people, it's about me. And this is what my integrity looks like.
I hear in that integrity, it's about no one knows you like you do. Like really listening to what it is that you do know is true about what works for you, about the way that you want to work, about, however it is that you want to live your life. Wow. I've never thought about that before as far as like just what integrity really means. It's listening to what you know.
Yeah, 100%. The first time I had that realization was when I got divorced. And it was during medical school. And it happened after what seemed like a very short marriage, even though it had been a long relationship. And I finally told myself that nobody else knows what's really going on. I'm the only person that has all the information to make this decision. And I'm going to trust myself on that, even though this is really hard.
So powerful. We've been told to not trust ourselves, to not listen and always look outside. Such a moment to be able to recognize how that is complete BS.
And like you said, often overlaid through the patriarchy and honestly misogyny. And you look at the history of medicine, it wasn't until, it was like the 1970s that some of the medical schools in the United States finally allowed women in. Some did before that, but there were still some schools that it took that long. So you look at the history of, how did we get here? Well, there's still a lot of that patriarchy rooted in the organizational cultures that we work in.
Well, and I think that as soon as you said that question of how did we get here, I was like, whatever it is, how are we going to just identify it now? Like, not even so much. Yes, I love history. I love seeing how things have been woven together over time, maybe where something starts off and then it creates this big, ugly monster. How about that? I'm clearly around Pennsylvania Dutch cheese right now that I'm thinking about Munster cheese.
I love cheese. I'm like, ooh,
Oh
yeah, it's Munster.
I'm totally switching into food mode. Where it is right now, like when I can be aware of how this isn't something that happened back in the day. It's happening right now. It's making me like, I'm questioning myself because of the way that the system is acting today. And then again, coming back to that integrity and trust and knowing, and what is it that I do know? Because I think that's the only way that we can try to find a different path going forward, or just a different way to be able to start recognizing the power of that, knowing that we all have it.
Leaning into that, one of the most powerful things that I read preparing for this podcast was your revitalization moment. And for the listeners, this is actually a term that I've coined when I wrote my book that'll come out later this year. And I define a revitalization as an inflection point plus clarity. And we have lots of inflection points in our life. It's when something changes and you can't go back. But it doesn't always lead to a revitalization. There has to be that clarity that happens. And you described a couple. Would you be willing to share one of them?
It's so funny because right now I'm blushing going, okay, I know I mentioned a couple because there's so many. I was like, I don't even remember which ones I said. But that's the thing. I have so many to choose from. How about that? I may have actually shared this with you in a prior conversation as opposed to what I shared there. But I think of, that moment where it becomes very clear. And I go back even just, my goodness, it was probably 2020 where, hearing so much about burnout. And I totally was walking into this as a skeptic. I'm like, what is this burnout thing? Everybody's talking about it like all the time. And what, does everybody have burnout? And, questions that I laugh at now, but those are the questions I was asking. And it just didn't resonate with me as I was hearing about, this whole triad of burnout and what that looks like and feels like. I'm like, okay, I don't understand. And it was, I don't know, probably a bad weather day. And I was just cleaning out my closet because I need to make space for me to do the podcast, right? So podcast started.
That's right.
My podcast started in my closet. But what I did was I was picking out something and I found a t-shirt that my husband had made for me that I had been so embarrassed about way back when. He'd given this to me as a Christmas gift. And it had on the front of it, the emblem of the hospital that I worked at. And on the back, it said in big, bold letters, I'm going to keep this clean. It just said F 'em all, but it didn't just say F. Okay. And I was so embarrassed when he gave this to me. He's like, oh, that's what you say every day. And he's right, because here I was working full-time general pediatrics, burning the candle at both ends. Every night I would come home and I would just say F 'em all. And I didn't think of myself as a pediatrician with a sailor's mouth back then, but I sure did. I really did. And when I picked it up and I looked at this in 2020, so years, my goodness, 12, 13 years later, and questioned why I still had it in my closet, but it was for that moment that I recognized that's depersonalization. That's depersonalization. And it just occurred to me that, okay, hold on. I knew I was exhausted. I knew I was just overwhelmed, that I just didn't have enough. But the thing is that I thought at the time when I was experiencing what I describe as one of my early episodes of burnout, I thought that it was something was wrong with me, that I wasn't cut out to do this, that I wasn't meant to practice full-time medicine in the military and all these things. And it just hit me that moment. So that clarity that it wasn't me. Okay, it was burnout, and let's look at so much more. It wasn't that I was defective or not cut out for this, but there's so much more that I need to explore now about what that really meant. What the heck is this burnout thing anyway, besides this, burnout triad? Let me find out more about it, because now it's hitting closer to home. And that was clarity as far as giving a name to what it was that I'd experienced, and being able to recognize again that it wasn't some kind of personality flaw or something that I wasn't good enough, which was always the story. I wasn't good enough as a mom, as a doctor, all these things. And it just, the clearness of the clarity is that what I was telling myself had been a lie. That wasn't the case.
There's so much there. And the thing that's really standing out to me is I think when you go through, a lot of us that go through burnout, many of us have gone through it a few times. The first time, at least, most of the time, you're like, I just want to get rid of this. Like, I just want to be like the other doctors. And Michelle Woolhouse, and we'll put a link to that episode in the show notes. She has this beautiful book, and in it, she shares that instead of looking at your burnout, like what we're saying, that something's wrong with you, look at it as your soul trying to give you a signal to get you on the right path, on your path. And hearing what you're doing now, which I wanted to share with our listeners, and what I was able to do after I went through my last episode and, direct my career towards revitalize and simulation with a little bit of emergency medicine mixed in there. Now I feel, again, in line with my integrity. So burnout is a painful thing. Like, there's pain associated with it. But just like when there's pain associated with physical trauma, we know as doctors, there's a reason for that pain. It's trying to get us to stop, to get away from the thing that's hurting us. And so I wonder, for our audience, could you accept the burnout? Could you accept that you're having it? And that to get through it, maybe looking into what you need and what would get you on the path of integrity to practicing medicine in a way that would actually feel good, and to bring it back to what you said earlier, in a way that you could show up as your best self.
Yeah. And I think that there's so much that's in that, because that's like a whole journey right there. And I recognize, even as you were saying it, that I could feel kind of my heart constrict a little bit about the word accepting, like accepting burnout in the moment. Like, what does it mean to accept it right now? And it's painful. It's painful because we are fixers. We want to say that we're healers, but I got to tell you, like, while we are at the heart, we've been trained to fix, like, identify the problem. All right, let's fix it. Let's make it all go away. And it's hard because we see burnout and then we're like, hold on, I need to accept this. I just want to fix it and get it the heck out of here, because that's how I have been trained. That's what I know what to do. That's survival to me, is fixing it. And I think that that word acceptance is very fitting. And yet I'm recognizing how it's so uncomfortable in the moment. I think as I go back and kind of like whisper in the ear of me at whatever that was, 30 years old, what do you need? And I think that, as I think about what the CEO was asking me, like, how do you work at your best? She was actually saying, like, what do you need? What can we, how can we structure this for you? And kind of going back and thinking about how that burnout experience is when we're not living or working aligned with, what it is that is meaningful or in integrity with how it works for us. We're being asked to do, the whole doing more with less, and how eventually we're the ones that are experiencing the, how do I say it, just the consequences of doing that over and over again. That stress burden is just something that we keep on carrying with us. And so asking, like, what is it that we need? Oh, the younger version of me has a whole lot of ideas. She really wished someone would have asked that way back when.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, gosh. We're going to have to record another episode because we have not even scratched the surface of your coaching practice. And I do want to spend a few moments on that. Can you describe how you coach? What does it look like?
I again go back to, it depends on the day. It depends on the situation. It's kind of like my answer of what it is that I do for work. My coaching practice, for a number of years kind of had two different heads and they kind of are coming together. And that's why I'm saying that it's evolving. And I work with parents who are worrying about their family's weight, whether it is the impact of their weight on raising a healthy family, if it's concerns about kind of like side-eyeing how our kids are growing, how they're eating, what's going on with their growth curves, and what it is that we can do to help raise kids in a way that is not just bringing in all of the diet and the restriction and fear about, introducing eating disorders and undue focus on food and body. And so, I work with parents there. And then I also work with physicians as well about all the things, whether it's burnout, whether it is about, that work-life integration, about creating a life that we're like, yes, please, I actually do want to live this life. And for a while, I thought that these were like two different things, but it underlying all of it, I see it as really how do we identify the stressors that we are experiencing and how are they showing up in different ways in our life? Because I think that, even at the heart of it, when we're talking about how our kids are growing and raising a healthy family, there's so many messages that are out there as far as like what it needs to look like to be a parent, to be a physician, to help families, who are on this journey and concerns about struggles with weight, and also just what it looks like to be a parent doing their best. There's so many layers of rules. And what I do in my coaching is kind of pull back those rules that we have been hearing time and time again, what it needs to look like, all the different layers of stressors. Because when we identify that the stress is actually about, okay, I think I'm just doing a crappy job, parenting, but I've been told to focus on my kid's weight in order to somehow say that I'm doing a better job. We recognize that focus on the kids is actually not helping them or our relationship or their health. So it's, we keep on talking about getting to the root cause, to the root source of what's going on. And I'm looking at it as what's going on with that stressor that you're experiencing at home, at work, and teasing that together depending on, what the focus is right now.
Wow. I mean, that sounds so beneficial. And it was mind-opening for me recently when I went through my functional medicine journey with a MD. She actually paired me up with a coach. And I know you've done some of that too, that coaches can be integrated into medical practices. So for some of our listeners that are doing lifestyle medicine, functional medicine, even primary care, because some of the conversations that we like, the more I get into the coaching world, there's so many times I'm with a patient and I'm like, something else needs to happen here. And like my role as the ER doc in this very medically driven encounter isn't where this needs to happen. Like this is not the container that can hold what needs to happen. And a coach would be a great offloading me, which sounds kind of cold, but really getting at the root of what would actually move this person closer to what they want.
Yeah. And I think that there's so much that we've thought that it's our job as physicians to address all the needs and, kind of like talking about that burden, I need to be offloaded. but how can we engage with more folks to be able to have the conversations that really need to happen? And I think of coaching more than anything else as learning a new language and speaking a new language with individuals to find out, again, what's important for them, what their goals are, what are their values, what are their strengths. And in medicine, again, we've been taught to look for what's broken so that we can fix it. And in coaching, it's looking at what's operating here, what's working, and where do we want to create this foundation so we can build from it. So they can work together very nicely, whether it's something like I use coaching language in my medical evaluations, in my medical, visits. And yet I also know that there are times that it's like, okay, this is something that we need a designated coaching conversation because there's so much more that we can explore here.
I have a feeling there's going to be some listeners that want to connect with you. And I also believe you have a program coming up. Can you share more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So 2 things. So I do have a resource for your listeners if you'd like to share. If you come on over to my website, so wendyschofermd.com, was it a / stress relief? I've created a resource guide on modern day stress relief for parents and kind of looking at that stress cycle and what it is that we can do to really start understanding the stress and then the steps that you can start taking today to start moving towards what it is that you want to experience. And the program, my signature program is called Family in Focus. It is a group coaching program for parents who are worried about their children's weight. And we have created the community so that parents can come together, recognize that you are not alone. It is parents only so that we can speak freely about parent concerns. We do not need kids' ears in the background as we are really kind of understanding and having these conversations that need to happen so that we can understand how weight stigma and weight bias have really come into our homes and what we can do to help without letting those monsters rear their heads. And so the next group of Family in Focus, I have one that just started here in January, and I have another one that's going to be starting up in April as well.
That's wonderful and such a needed resource. I think about the way weight was discussed in my house and how that's impacted me, as I'm, almost 40 years old. So I think it's courageous for parents to take that deep dive with you and look at how the stigma and bias affects our children and what could be more important.
I love that word courageous because there's nothing truer than that. Recognizing what it is that we've grown up with, the messages in the environment, but also that we are bringing into the environment at home. And we think that they are just the way it is. Kind of like we were saying before, all these things, it's just the way it's done. But having the courage to say, this doesn't work for me. This isn't the way that I want to keep doing this for my family. I want to find different ways to move forward. That takes courage and no better word for it. Absolutely no better word.
This has been just wonderful getting to talk with you. And I want to make sure people know how to spell your last name to find your website. So say your website again and then spell your last name.
Oh gosh, thank you for that because I always know when people do not know me when they send me mail. So it's wendyschofermd.com and the chauffeur is spelled SCHOFER.
Thank you.
Don't add any of those extra letters. Just make sure you get the C in there.
Awesome. Well, this has been fantastic. And I just want to put a quick plug in. So you are one of our Revitalize community members. So people that join the community we'll be able to send you messages. And as we grow, we can look at, how do we pull in your expertise? Is there a circle within Revitalize that gets at some of the topics that you've covered today? So if you're interested in learning more about the circle, we'll have that in the show notes as well. Anything you want to leave our listeners with?
Thank you so much for creating the community, because it's so powerful to be able to have these circles and like looking at it where we are all sharing our experiences, our gifts. And I think that's really where, this is feminism right here. We're going against this whole like patriarchal, this is the way it's done. We're coming together in circles to be able to share what we know and to grow together.
Yeah, that's what it's about, shortening the learning curve. I look back at the last 15 years, and if I had known a quarter of what I know now, who knows where I'd be. So that's what we're about here, is paying it forward and shortening the learning curve, so people can get to that place where they're walking their integrity and being able to practice medicine and live life in their best way, bringing it back to that. So thank you, Wendy. And I can't wait to have you back on the podcast.
Thank you, Andrea. I look forward to it.
Thanks for listening to The Revitalizing Doctor, a project of Revitalize Women Physician Circle. Our mission is to connect women physicians and allies through innovative, value-based coaching methods to ignite the courage and clarity necessary to create change and thrive. If you're interested in working with us, check out our website, peoplealwayshcc.com/revitalize. This podcast represents the views of our hosts and guests. It does not reflect the views of any institution we work for or with. Podcast production assistance is provided by Caitlin Din and Ali Dingus. Sound editing for this podcast is brought to you by Better Podcasting Services. You can find them at betterpodcastingservices.com.
Hi, it's Dr. Risa E. Lewis, dropping in to tell you about a book that Dr. Adara Landry and I wrote. It's called Microskills, Small Actions, Big Impact. It's a business self-help book coming in 2024 by HarperCollins. Pre-order now. Microskills, Small Actions, Big Impact, wherever you buy your books.